Oh, okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody. We had a little hiatus in the middle. Happy to have you guys back and looking forward to our third session. Um, Thank you, Robbie, again for joining us tonight. And I just want to start today as we have done in the tradition of the past. Remembering that we are 355 days into this war and 355 days that our hostages are still in captivity. And today I want to read you a poem by a woman called Iris Elia Cohen. Iris Cohen is the mother of Elia Cohen, actually from my community here in Soledad here in Israel. And it's called For Weeks I've Been Bleeding Poems. And the English, she's Hebrew speaking, but the English translation goes like this, and then I'm going to hand over to Robbie. I name the file sorrow. I delete, name it October, change it to 7. Replace it with chasm, change chasms, name it hell-like, name it hope. Command the computer to remember. It responds, saving hope. Say that Reese is like one of the most positive, amazing women that I don't know her personally, but I've heard her speak a number of times, and amazing hope and resilience. And we pray for him and all the other hostages. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Robbie. Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks. Sarah, can you stick that in the chat or send it me at something? Thanks. Hello, everybody. So I do hope that the Laurie, Jerry, Steve, Michael, and Yuval will be able to show their faces in a minute. In the meantime, just to kind of give a little bit of a warning. Hi, Jerry. Hi, Laurie. It's all right. We don't mind seeing you sick, Yuval. Whatever you want. Just to say, as you may well have heard, things have hotted up since we last met. I'm here in the north, and so basically I have to say that if the whole screen disappears, then it's just the internet's gone down. But if you see me get up and run, it's because the sirens have gone off. We got 30 seconds to get to over there to the shelters. So if that happens, that's why. Yep. So, right. Okay. Sorry there. So, sorry, I'm sick. Okay. So we shall begin. Let me just share the screen. Steve, Michael, and Jerry, looking forward to seeing you. Healthy arguments. Still remembering Romy, who is still in Gaza. I just realized today is a Wednesday. Wednesdays are Romy's day. Romy always loves wearing leopard skin, and in Hebrew it's menumar, the word for sort of that kind of pattern. So the hashtag menumar Romy has been going around, and every Wednesday, you'll see everyone in Tel Aviv wearing leopard skin. So there's this massive campaign that's every Wednesday. Even you have a dotted nail polish and even cookies. So if you folks ever want to get into talking about or remembering or bringing to the attention of Romy, all you need to do is wear some awful clothes on a Wednesday. That's Romy. Remembering where we were. In our first session, we talked about the 4HQ, the 4 Hatikva questions, the question about how do we stay safe? What's the best way of doing that? What are our challenges? And when do we recognize a threat of annihilation or a threat to our interests? We also are looking at the question of peoplehood, of the Jewishness of the state. Are we how's the religious monopoly going? How is solidarity among Jews around the world? And how are Jewish values, which look out for people who are not Jewish, how's that working out? The questions about freedom, democracy, rights, liberal values, I guess we might say, and the question of our territory. Remember, these are our four questions at the heart of pretty much every argument about Israel that we can probably sniff out. Underlying in the argument is a differing answer to one or all or some of these questions. And then we talked about three kinds of an argument. If you remember, there was the debate where I must convince you, the negotiation where we must decide, and then there's the healthy argument where we want to grow and learn. There was something that, so before we move on, let's just stop there for us for a second. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Laurie. Fantastic. 4HQ is the...
If anyone wants to do Chavruta to deepen it for high holidays, let me know.
Fantastic, fantastic. I can also I can share out bits and pieces that we have from we once even did a there's this Pesach. It works really nicely because Pesach basically is the Zionist holiday of going to live in Israel. But anyway, where were we? Yes, it was something that I was thinking about the other day, that quite often our arguments where I have to convince you or where we have to agree, when we're arguing about things to do with a country, to do with sort of large scale issues, it's always quite interesting to just remind oneself of one's political humility. And what I mean by that is, if you and I have an argument about what Israel should do, it's not going to have any effect on what Israel does. And that may well free us to acknowledge that therefore we're having the conversation for a different reason. And it might allow us to let go of my need to convince you, because it's probably unlikely going to change anything. And even if we agree on something, it's unlikely going to be applied. And so maybe let's have this conversation for the sake of it, hence the phrase "for the sake of argument." Did we have, over the last few weeks, have you either come across a situation where you've found yourself sniffing out these four Hatikva questions, or whether you've found yourself in a situation where you've been in an argument that you're recognizing what kind of argument you're in? Laura, tell us about it.
I'm not going to be coherent, but I will just share that I was at a local candidates kind of panel. And there's a hot debate going on in my area about the introduction of liberated ethnic studies curriculum, which names Jews as colonizers and doesn't mention anti-Semitism at all. So the first person who had a question for the panel was coming from the side of the aisle that wants this curriculum introduced. And I'll just say that, like, I give credit to this experience, this for the sake of argument cohort and learning experience, in my desire to approach her after the Q&A session. And just kind of, because I had said something that was a little bit counter to her position. I said, I took ethnic studies in high school. I'm probably the only one in this room who was required to take it. And I thought it was bad for these reasons, and I'm worried about it being bad for other reasons. But I went up to her and I said, I just wanted to say that, like, I know both of us were talking about this. And I hope I didn't, come off as undermining what you're trying to say. And I want to acknowledge that, like, you feel passionately about this and I feel passionately. And then she had a hijab, and shortly thereafter, the conversation about the war in Gaza started to come up. And I'll just say that, like, I didn't defend any position. I didn't counter any of the things that she was saying, because she was kind of coming from a monologue standpoint. But I just tried to double down on, like, I think I even repeated, like, we need to get to what the question is in our disagreement right now. Like, and when we are talking about this topic, like, we need to understand what the central question is in order to move
Ooh.
through it. And so, like, that was something that at least we could agree on, even if we didn't have a rapport to go further than that. But it was such a scary moment, but I just felt like I had to practice it. If I'm doing this, I had to, like, I had to make an effort to have a conversation with somebody who is in their zone and I'm in my zone, and I didn't sleep so well that night. I was having lots of conversations with her in my dreams, but yeah.
Right, all those things that I should have said, might have said, could have said.
Yes, right.
Wow. Kol hakavod. Nice one, Nora. Hooray. I hope that confused her. Nancy.
So I guess my question to you, Laura, is, and I appreciate you using everything that we've learned, but I guess my question is why did you feel you had to apologize right at the beginning? Why not just go up and say, I'd love to have a conversation with you so we can grow and learn? And because did she apologize to you?
No, and I think there's an ongoing feeling of bending over backwards to make peace with people who don't want to make peace back with you. Like, and knowing that unless we get to a point where we're humanizing each other and have some other commonality, we're never going to get to the next step of the conversation. But I think I was using the deference approach of, like, I did directly contradict something that she was saying, and I did it not directly to her. I did it to the candidate. She asked her question to the candidates and I gave my unsolicited opinion. And so what I was apologizing for was, like, maybe the format and the forum, but still saying, like, I'm coming to you if you want to expand upon this, or, like, do it out mano y mano or mamo y mamo, as I was feeling, because it was all about Palo Alto parents, and these candidates are running for the school board. So yeah, that's my answer.
Wow. Thank you. Good question, and good. It's always a challenge about the extent to which I choose to lower the status that I'm playing in order to enter into the conversation.
Laura, can you share how it turned out, that vote with the school board?
They are voting in January. So whoever the 3 seats that are available for re-election, will have 3 new candidates, and then the decision will get made. And that's why I think so many locals are very involved in it, because
Did you get a sense of, was there a sense of, like, strong feelings on that issue?
I'm sure there are no strong feelings about it. I think everyone's truly chill.
I'm curious.
We can talk about it more if you'd like.
Understood. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, connect up later. Wow, thank you. And it's valuable for me to be reminded of how many arguments there are in the States. We actually just got approached by some organization asking for us to work with communities between November and January, because they're expecting that unpleasant things might happen during those few months. It's a good time of year, good time of the world. Thank you, folks. Let's, Laurie, do you want to say something?
Oh, I wanted to give, like, a little bit of a different example briefly, if I could. On Call Me Back, which is one of the most helpful podcasts on Israel stuff with Dan Senor, Yossi Klein Halevi was on whatever in the last week or so. And there was a point where they were talking about, is the question 1967 borders, or is the question 1948 paradigm?
Yep.
And they were saying that, either Israel is on one paradigm and the Palestinians are on the other, and the world either is on one or the other. And maybe we were duped and maybe they were duped, and we're trying to figure that out. So, but just to actually say, like, okay, there's a core framing that is sort of not being articulated, but that's the issue between those points. And I guess where I am a little stuck is and maybe it's because I'm a rabbi, but I think there's pressure to address content. And we're talking about form. And it feels safer to talk about form, how to argue, you know. Many sermons have been given, many election cycles on this, but I don't know how to quite gently start to feel confident, you know, touching content the way Laura did in the tool practicing.
I get what you're saying, and I know that in a 4-part series, which is also looking at argument skills, so the amount of Israel content we can dig into is kind of limited. But the plan is that in our final session, what we're going to be doing is drawing on examples of conversations and seeing how the 4 parts, the 4 questions can be of value in these arguments. But you're right. It's a different, it's an additional discipline which is necessary. Yeah, happy to talk to you offline about other things that I could point you to, or we have to offer in these different things. But beyond that, I'm going to just also recommend another podcast that I have great respect for. It's called Unholy: 2 Jews on the News. This is Yonit Levy, who is the anchor for Channel 12 News, has been the anchor for the last 20 years, having a weekly conversation with Jonathan Friedland, who is a British journalist and writer who works at The Guardian, so a very left-leaning publication in the UK, and very committed Zionist. That he'd probably keep that a little bit quieter when he's at The Guardian. But basically, the 2 of them are having a conversation constantly, not only about what's going on in Israel, what's going on in the Jewish world. And the most fascinating thing is their relationship and the way in which they come at things from a different place, or from a different way. They also have fascinating guests, but I find most fascinating their conversations between the 2 of them, especially since the 7th of October. I mean, they've been going for several years. But yep. So, folks, we are nevertheless going to dig in to another level of this argument technique. And what I'm now going to share to you is the intentions. Whenever I've worked with groups of, I'm going to say, people of under 35, there is always an expectation that before we can ever speak to each other, we must have a set of rules as to how we talk to each other. Is that familiar to any of you? Yeah, okay. So it's something that varies. Okay, Jill, less so, others more so. I'll tell you, it started when we were working with Moishe House. So Moishe House, for about 4 or 5 years, I was running an Israel seminar for them, 4 or 5 days thing. And I was, when we first started, I was told by the professionals of Moishe House that we must, first of all, set expectations and address community norms. Otherwise, people will get nervous. That there were these rules, like you have to speak from the I. Do you know this thing? It's about that you need to say, if you're saying something, you need to say, I feel such and such, rather than you. And for me, being literal and cynical, I was like, speak from the I. How does that work? That's not anatomically possible. And basically, I was being thoroughly disrespectful, and said to them that I think that these rules are stupid because you're so what it was doing was establishing such a safe space that you couldn't say anything, which was not at all popular when I said that. It's very strange when you say that things that are important to people are stupid. Funnily enough, that pisses them off. But that there was an attempt to, I don't want to hurt you in any way, shape, or form, and it was coming from a very generous and sensitive place, and led to a position where you would rather not say anything rather than possibly say something which will upset you. of the form versus content issue is people's responses to the presidential debate. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, presidential debates is all about form, isn't it? However much one would prefer it to be about content. Anyway, I always read the chats when I shouldn't necessarily. So we said to them, all right, well, we're going to throw away your expectations. We're just not going to do them. And that got people very angry, and it didn't work. So the following year, we said, okay, what I need to do is replace these expectations with different ones, what we called stretch statements. And we established this idea that this principle that we're coming in to stretch ourselves, not to breaking point, but to stretch, and that there are various intentions or rules or plans that you can bring in order to do that. So let me bring in the way that we work with our stretch intentions. We have 5 stretch intentions. When we're working in person, we actually have like a stress ball. So we've got a stress cube with these all on the cube itself, so you can squeeze it if you're stressed and throw it at people. So first one is about curiosity. Be more a gatherer than a hunter. Enter into a conversation with curiosity as your target. Okay. In all kind of bridge buildy, difficult conversation-y kind of stuff, they'll talk about leading with curiosity. But what we've noticed is that there are 2 kinds of curiosity. There is the curiosity of the hunter and the curiosity of the gatherer. So my brother, who is a brilliant lawyer, we argue all the time, and he always shows great curiosity and asks me about my opinion and asks me why I think such and such and where do I get that idea from, all the better to skewer me later. That he's asking questions in order to clarify the weaknesses of what I've got to say in order to get me later, to do the gotcha. And we're suggesting that we need to go into these conversations not with that kind of curiosity, but the curiosity of the gatherer, of the gaining perspectives, on the one hand. On the other hand, and I think this half turns to Nancy, what was also in your mind, is also you need to be courageous and take the risk of adding your opinion to the conversation without knowing how it may be received. As in, not only I want to listen carefully and be respectful of you, but also I'm not going to stop myself from being myself. And so like one is the ears and one is the mouth in this sort of sense. The courageous thing we're noticing more and more, again, with folks under 30 in particular, the more that you are of the I generation, as in iPhone, as in smartphones, the more you are a native to smartphones and social media, the more you have grown up with constant judgment or constant searching for public affirmation, right? I'm always looking for the likes. I'm always looking for the hearts. I know my daughter, she's 24 now. Thankfully, we could have a laugh with her about it, but it was important to her to know how many, when she uploaded that photo to Instagram, she only got 150 hearts, and normally over 170 is when you feel good about yourself. So the idea of risking unpopularity is greater than it was, I think, in my generation. So be more a gatherer than a hunter, be courageous. This is, by the way, this whole slide I'll stick into the chat in a minute. Third thing, everyone is allowed to change their minds, to forget or ignore the last stand they took, right? Again, remember, these are a stretch intentions when I'm doing some programming, okay? It's not something that, Lara, I'm going to be able to bring up when I'm having the conversation with the person I met at the committee. But when I'm setting up some kind of programming, these are the kind of intentions that we might suggest going into these conversations. When you've got that issue in your JCC and you want to turn it from an underground grumble to an above ground programming and conversation about it, these are the kind of intentions that we bring forward. You're allowed to change your mind. And that means I'm not allowed to catch you and say, gotcha, 3 minutes ago you said this, or 3 years ago you posted that. We're leaving ourselves space to grow. Fourth thing is to go visit other people's opinions, like as if you're going to visit their home. While you're there, behave like a nice guest. You're always free to go home whenever you want. So that's this idea that just as if I go to someone's house, I'm going to sit in their living room. I will notice that their wallpaper is really ugly. I will notice that there's a strange smell coming from the kitchen. But I may not say that while I'm in the house. I'll have the cup of tea. I'll say, thank you very much. And at a certain point, I'll go home because it's not my house. And that if we're able to do that with someone else's opinion as well, to be in the opinion, to listen to it, to be a guest there, and not feel that having had that conversation, I'm in any way saying that's my kind of house. And I can leave when I want. That's the fourth piece. And the fifth piece, and I think that what you're beginning to notice here, especially with that last one and as this next one, is that an element of this work is countercultural. That there's something which doesn't quite flow with the way that I normally do things. And when we finish with this slide, I'd like listen out and feel free to share where this kind of doesn't harmonize or with your assumptions. So the final thing we found really important is, see, we use the word argument, not difficult conversation. And the reason we use the word argument is because we believe that emotions are important. And actually, if we're going to talk about something important, then emotions will be involved. And especially when we're working in the JCC, we're working in the realm of identity and identity development. And our full selves involve both our heart as well as our head. It's like Dorit, my wife, would always tell me when we were in an argument and I would tell her to calm down, she would say, other than, you know, throwing something at me for being an idiot, but also, if I calm down, I'm bored. If you don't want my emotions involved, I'm bored. We want it to be important, and so emotions are there. And at the same time, what we have been noticing again over the last 5 to 10 years in the United States is that emotions can be stop signs rather than just signals. And we're suggesting your emotions and talking about your emotions must be signals, not stop signs. It's not a veto. For me to say I'm upset about something doesn't necessarily mean everybody must now change the subject. And so we have sort of 3 ideas. First of all, passion should have a seat at the table, but not a veto. Likewise, if I'm upset or if I'm angry, your anger, you're welcome to be angry, just don't shut everyone else up. Check your lines between hurt and harm. So hurt and harm, I think I sort of briefly mentioned this last week. I'm gonna come off and I'm gonna stick it in the chat. The difference between hurt and harm actually emerges from here we go. The intention. I need to copy and paste that here so you can have that slide. In pain medicine, the most important thing to do is to differentiate between hurt and harm. So if I've whacked my leg against something and it's incredibly painful, the medical question is, let's do an X-ray and check if your leg is broken. Okay? If my leg is broken, that is harm, and if I keep walking, it will do me even more harm. But if my leg isn't broken, and you know the scan says nothing is actually broken, it's just painful, then I should keep walking. Okay? That the differentiation between hurt and both hurt and harm is painful, but one means I should step away, and the other one just means it hurts. And quite often we're finding that when we're in conversations with folks of this generation or generations, the the sensitivity to mental health sometimes leads us to blur the difference between hurt and harm. And that what we're encouraging folks to do is, I can't be the judge of whether you're hurt or harmed, right? I'm not going to tell you, don't be silly, you can't be harmed by that, it's just hurt. But I am going to encourage you to check for yourself, simply to be aware that I might find this uncomfortable, I might find this painful. Is this harming me? Or does this just hurt? And if it hurts, and then likewise, then I can hear when someone says, this is painful for me, then I need to hear that, be sensitive to it, and know that I don't have to take responsibility for it. Because I don't know whether you're hurt or harmed. That's for you to decide, but to check yourself. Laurie says, I think that plays into how anti-Semitic acts are reported. Is it hurt or harm? If that's just gaslighting too. Look, I think it's, I don't think in any situation I need to be in a position where somebody deliberately hurts me, right? I don't need to be there anyway. And so hurt or harm in that sense is not a good thing. But if we're in a conversation and what you're saying or the issues that you're bringing up hurt me, it's not necessarily deliberate, I suppose, is the point, right? But racism and anti-Semitism is always a challenging one. But I suppose here's something. Somebody may well ask me about my Judaism and might make me feel, or I might then feel isolated or othered, when actually all they're doing is showing curiosity and openness and even inclusivity. It's just that they are interested. I need to check. Was I harmed by that, or did it just hurt? And actually get over it, Robbie. They're being nice at the end of the day. Of these 5, and you've got them in the chat there. Do any of these fit with you? Do any of these seem like something that you're strong at doing? And likewise, are any of these something that you feel is more challenging for you? And are there any that you question or reject? That's a pretty broad question. Questions?
Can you put them back up on the screen so we can see them again?
Sure. I stuck them in the chat. Can you see that there? That link? Because then I can see you. Is that okay? Cool.
I'm still thinking about
Oh,
earlier.
sorry, Haley. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about, I'm sorry if somebody else was speaking.
Go.
Thinking about starting a conversation with an apology. Sometimes I think that I do that simply because I am a woman and that women are kind of taught to be a more sensitive person in the conversation. But I'm thinking about that really with the visiting other people's opinions, and the emotions are signals and not stop signs.
Yep.
I think especially with something like that person was very committed to thinking that Jewish people and that Israelis were colonizers, right? So let's just confront that straight up and be like, I am so sorry that that is your impression of what has gone on here. And I think that when you do that, you're bringing yourself down, you know what I mean? And I think that that is a good thing. I think that you do have to take the high road and kind of get on people's level, and you're visiting their opinion when you are saying, you know, I get where that's really offensive to you. That would be really upsetting if that was my reality as well, you know? So I think that starting there is a good place, and then you're able to actually visit their opinion because they know that you're not going to come at them and be like, so it's interesting that you feel that way, but you are wrong, and I'm not going to apologize for anything that has happened here. So you're kind of already minimizing the hurt and harm as you get into it.
Yeah, Kaylee, I think I don't want to go too far down this apology stuff. But what I would say is, I think that as with most phrases that we use, the key is how conscious we are that we're using them for a particular reason, right? And so, as you said, if I'm instinctively saying sorry because I just feel like I need to apologize for my existence, and that's one thing. if I'm choosing to use the apology as a technique, as a way of beginning a conversation, then precisely, I think what you're saying is that you're coming stronger. Behaving weaker is a strong move, and it comes from how conscious you are in using that. I'm going to read the chat, and then we're going to go to Lael. I feel that number 5 is more challenging for me. The hurt and harm. Fully okay with being emotional and passionate, but many people I interact with see that as a stop sign when I do not. Yep. I agree with you, Gabby. From my perspective, I often find there's room for emotion when both sides show patience and empathy. I'm sorry, but I don't think we should always apologize for the opinions of people. Yep. Cool.
Right.
So I just want to say that just to reassert that these 5 intentions are when I'm doing programming. So I think I'm going to put it this way. We have not checked whether these are of value if they are applied unilaterally. I have a feeling that they are still useful, even if they're applied unilaterally, but they may not be. But without doubt, they are of value if I bring it up in a group situation when I'm doing programming around arguing. I think that's the point. So the mutuality, that at least there is a shared language, even if there isn't a shared buy-in to this approach of doing things. Lael.
So of these 5, I think that where we have the most potential for pitfalls is the 5th one, which everybody seems to be focusing on, right? Because I think that is the most difficult one. I think that it's very challenging for any of us to understand when we're coming from a place of reactive emotion. And so, to be in this space of hurt, it's a very physical, reactive thing, I think, that happens for people. And even if we all agree, like, okay, I'm not going to let this stop the conversation, it just becomes very difficult to have the conversation when your heart is racing, you feel like you're being attacked, you feel, so I think, just as human animals, that is really where it might be helpful. I think even in a group that agrees to all of these rules, forget it when you're in a group or in a situation where nobody's even talking about the rules, to have some framework for what that actually looks like. Because I think we need more specific bullet points under this one of how do you manage that, right? Like what are some tips?
Thank you, Lael. There's a further level that we actually have sort of prompts and things to say. But really, the trick is if you avoid working with human beings, it goes much smoother. Michael.
All right. Well, I really like items 1 and 2, and like others, I have some questions about number 4 and 5. It's especially when we're not in a sort of a group where people have agreed on things. I think that one thing that often troubles me, and it seems like a more recent thing, like by which I mean the past 5 or 10 years, is that as soon as someone kind of claims a space of having been hurt or claims a space of having some sort of emotion, suddenly that implies that they are therefore in the right and that the other person therefore has to apologize or defend themselves, when in reality they just might either be being ridiculous, oversensitive, or something like that. And that whole language around things like, I don't know, sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes not, but I feel othered. I feel like there's all these terms now that are relatively new, often taking an adjective and turning it into a verb or something like that.
I'm still here. I'm just opening windows.
Yeah.
I'm not.
No, sorry. Oh, okay.
No, keep talking. I'm just
about this stuff or anything. Okay. And it's just sort of a terminology that's come into play that seems weighted, and I sometimes want to call out the process. I think in a group where there's been a discussion around it, it could be different. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what we try and do here with this specifically number 5 is that we present this to the group. And in that sense, it is, like you've said, it is countercultural, because most of the time, if I say something that I'm hurt by, then I must be listened to. And what we're suggesting is that it's a signal, it's not a stop sign. but I also accept that there's another element of work that we're doing, and in particular, this has been about conversation between Israelis and Americans of the depth of my emotion, because I may not be overdoing it, I may be incredibly upset and traumatized, but even if I'm incredibly upset and traumatized, I might not. That doesn't necessarily mean that my opinion is right and you need to agree with me. And what we normally do is we point to endless examples of survivors of the 7th of October attack, those who are all the more we must make peace with Palestinians, and those who are all the more we must wipe out Palestinians, and they both come from the same traumatic experience. So a traumatic experience doesn't necessarily mean that my therefore must be accepted. Lara. And then we'll go into
yeah, I just wanted to say I like the empowering aspect of number 5 when you say do the scan for yourself and take some ownership and responsibility of how it lands with you, instead of just being fully passive and victim. And maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I have this really nice card that I got from Dr. Kathy Simon, who taught a course on nonviolent communication, and
she's fantastic.
It's really helped me. It's just saying, like, it sounds like we are thinking about this differently. I would like to hear more about how you are thinking about it. Then, if you're open to it, I'd like to share my perspective. So when you reach a gridlock, if you say those things, sometimes it just lowers the volume a little bit. And very often you'll see that people at least say on the surface that they want to know your opinion, even if that's just a politesse.
That's really nice. We've got Kathy is fantastic. And yeah, we have quite a few of those prompts. Maybe I'll bring them along next week. I wasn't planning to, but we definitely can do that. The other thing that these prompts do, I can't remember, I think it was Lael that you talked about it, is that they, quite apart from what's on the prompt, they force me to make a break in the way that my emotions are flowing. Because I simply have to stop there, look down on a piece of paper, choose to say it. It's going to shift my breathing. So it's going to make all sorts of, circuit breaker. It could even be, please, can I order fish and chips, would make a difference as well. But all the more so when I'm saying out loud this kind of thing, I'm embodying that idea, it makes a shift. Jerry has, Gabby, love these. Will be definitely sharing with my teacher. Boyfriend will be so useful in his class activity. Oh, I'm pleased I didn't, not in your relationship, but in your class activities. I've learned to acknowledge my emotions, Jerry, in a conversation rather than have the other person worry about them. Sweet. You can see from the color of my voice, the shaking my voice, that I'm feeling emotional about this stuff. But yes, you can see about this fist coming towards you that I enjoy using all of these approaches and feel I incorporate them. The second one is most challenging. Tend to withhold my opinion early on, do it to maintain the peace and flow of the conversation. I do feel it's driven by the fear of an unpredictable response. Yeah, it's look, I think I completely identify with that. Although from the other side, as in sometimes I wish I hadn't spoken out. But there's I remember somebody said this to my daughter once. It's something about being generous, that if you can see it, if I can bring myself to see that this conversation will be richer, even if more jagged, will be richer if there are more voices in it. And so I'm going to be generous by risking myself to share that opinion, to throw it into the pot. But I totally get the idea. Also, it's never bad to listen first before you got something to say. So long as what is it that Dorit was married before we met, as in widowed, divorced, whatever. And she always used to say that when we were courting, that she was frightened. But she always said that the fear is walking alongside us. The fear is in the room. Just as long as the fear doesn't stand in your way, you'll be okay. Frankel, space between stimulus and response. Sure. Yep. Yep. Verbal rather than silent version. Yeah, fair. Yep. Certainly. Good one. All right. Oh, Laura, final comment, and then let's to a story.
Sorry, I don't have a comment. I might have just left the hand raised by
All right.
accident. Yeah.
Got it. No problem. Okay. So this is, I'm going to read you a story which is, it's not yet out. You're getting a sneak preview. I think it's being sent out tomorrow. We brought out a new collection of stories to do with October 7. And remember what we'll do. I'll read the story. I'll stick the link in the chat. And then we'll split into groups. We'll talk about it, and I'll give you the initial question, which you're going to have to answer from your gut and from your percentage conviction from your head. Yep. Okay. So let me. Oh no, I don't need to share anything, do I? Wait a sec. Let me just get the link. Yeah. This is called "My Enemy's Enemy is Not My Friend." I'll stick that there, and I will make you lot smaller so that I can see it, and then I can read it. Yep. Yep. Sorry about this. I really should have like 3 different screens, shouldn't I? Then you can really do it perfectly. Okay, here it begins. He sauntered up to me before going inside. "Well done," he said in that smarmy English accent. "I think you are absolutely right. I am with you in your fight." He reached out his hand for me to shake. I looked down at his hand and up at his all too familiar face. Everyone around looked to see my response. I hadn't expected this. I was standing demonstrating outside the venue for the huge televised debate, "Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism?" I didn't care about the theories. I just wanted to help to get Inon out. My cousin has been kidnapped in Gaza since October 7th, and I was taking any opportunity that presented itself to draw attention to his situation. So there I was, holding a poster of his face, while across the entrance to the debate venue was a loud, hostile crowd of pro-Palestinian protesters. And here he was, offering me his hand in sight of everyone. My head and heart did not know what to do with themselves. My heart had been heavy all day. The overwhelmingly hostile responses I'd been receiving all day just for holding a kidnapped poster had gotten to me. This simple experience of someone walking up to me with a smile and a kind word threatened to move me to tears. But my head knew that this wasn't just anyone. This was him. He's one of those dark web right-wing intellectuals who uses long words and fluid eloquence to hide his racism. Up until October 7th, he'd spent most of his hot air arguing for nationalism, anti-immigration, and Islamophobia. Worse than that, he talked too much about Nazism in a blasé kind of way. "I see no reason," he once drawled, "why every other country in the world should be prevented from feeling pride in itself because the Germans mucked up twice in a century." It was the faux casual use of the phrase "mucked up" that got my goat. 2 world wars and the Holocaust were shrugged off like a child's mistake in a spelling test. And this awful man, this racist and Holocaust minimizer, was suddenly offering me support? Who wants support from someone like him? And why would I want everyone to see me accepting this support? His hand remained in the air before me as my mind continued to race towards an inner conflict. Yet who am I to give up on support from anyone? Israel now stands more isolated than ever. I'm standing holding the poster of my cousin who was taken hostage on October 7th, and people are spitting at me. My friends with whom I marched days on end for George Floyd won't speak to me. I'm even being accused of using the poster of Yinon to encourage genocide of Palestinians. And this is from people who were my total progressive allies only a few weeks before. None of my friends has sought me out to shake my hand. Forget shake my hand. No one's even asked me how I'm feeling. It's been months since Yinon was taken, months since Hamas rampaged through the kibbutz where I used to spend childhood summers, where my extended family lived. The rejection, the cold-hearted hostility, and their disdain for my tears have left me bewildered. And here's a man who's showing solidarity, a man who is now all over the net and the news arguing Israel's case. He's on our side. But I don't want him on our side. All these thoughts shoot through my brain at warp speed as he stands there, frozen in time. Should I shake his hand? Turn my back? What signal will I send to him and those who are staring at me? That's the story. Questions? My enemy's enemy is not my friend. So, your opening question that I'd like all of you to answer before continuing with the conversation: should the narrator shake the outstretched hand? Give your gut response, oops, and then what percentage you're convinced by your response, and then carry on the conversation. And you might also bring up, would you accept help from people who have other views that you find abhorrent? I'm not making an assumption that you think that his views are abhorrent, but this is the question. So let me put these questions into the chat as well, and then we'll split to have the conversations. Hang on a minute. There we go. So going beyond the chat, we're going to split you into your rooms, share your gut answer, your percentages, and we'll give that 15 minutes. There you go. Many thanks to my technical director, Sarah Sless. Okay.
So I think we have a little less than 15 minutes, otherwise you won't have time for.
Oh, I miscalculated, as always.
I can, how much am I broadcasting? How much are they going to have?
Let's give them 12 minutes. But didn't they get annoyed with, was this lot the last lot that got annoyed that we didn't give enough time? Shit,
It's
you know
okay.
what? So no, let's leave it 15. Worst comes to worst, we'll talk a bit more next week. I think
Not
better.
next week, it's the week after. Just because next week's the Chag. Okay. That's a complicated story.
I think
It's
that's
sort
good. Is that good?
Is that drawn on Murray a little bit?
Douglas Murray, yeah.
Yeah.
In the background, we even quote him, yeah. Absolutely.
In the background, what?
In the actual booklet, there's background, and we refer to Douglas Murray and when he said it and what he said, yeah.
Because people who don't know him, and most of us didn't really know who he was, thinks he was like God's gift to humanity. And then all of a sudden, we began to find out his background.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would call him a racist, but this character does.
Yeah.
But he certainly says provocative. He's been provocative for a good while.
Yeah.
And now I'm cold. Now I'm closing the windows a bit. I'm listening.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
So the question is, he's become almost like a household name in Israel, in people who read the English news. But how well is he known in England?
It depends in which crowd.
Right. So in the Jewish crowd, probably is now.
And the right on crowd, the progressive crowd, cancel him.
Yeah.
Have done for years. It was actually Johnny Friedland who said, yeah, I don't like him. I didn't like that Nazi quote. It was just a bit.
I love that. It's about one of the only podcasts that I religiously keep to each week. I on a Sunday.
It makes your Friday. For me, it's
well,
Friday.
that makes my Sunday.
Okay.
But actually, I think one of the best episodes was the therapy episode.
Yeah.
Where instead of hiding against it, they went at it, or not at it, but they
They went adjacent to it. I think he went for it far more than she did. She kind of. I don't really like her. I'm starting to like her again a bit more now, but back then I thought Johnny was giving a lot of ground and she wasn't giving anything.
So I think her issue is that she still tries to be sort of neutral politically.
Yes.
And he doesn't have to be. Even though Channel 12 is not neutral.
And also, I was going to say, I think that she also didn't realize how non-neutral she's become in the last year.
Well, Channel 12 is like, it's not news. It's sort of.
It was something I found out because one of I sort of give Johnny feedback every week. And one of my critiques was, what was it? He brought on that incredible Palestinian guy, Farouk Abu Khatib, or Farid Abu Khatib, amazing Palestinian guy, and Fania Oz Salzberger.
Yes, I remember that one.
And I said to him, come on. First of all, she's lovely, but she's representative of no one. She's a particular age. She's secular. You only have secular people on. And he said it was the only way that Channel 12 would allow us to have the Palestinian guy on.
But this isn't a Channel 12 broadcast.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is?
Or it's in association with, you'll find it on the N12 app. You'll find it there. And
because I also think they're not, they don't push themselves either. I mean, they had the one Haredi woman, which they keep referring to now each time because it was shocking. But they don't have eloquent right and center right people, and they need to. Because we're hearing.
Wasn't it? Is it Udi Segal or Amit
Segal? Amit Segal.
I love him. I think he's great. But well, no, but what he said was that, and I suddenly realized it was true. For the first 6 months of the war, they've got that incredible Arab.
Yeah.
He was not. They wouldn't allow. He wasn't on screen for 6 months. He was not even. He was never in the studio.
And because
he's an Arab.
That's interesting because I think a Hadisray, they also have a very eloquent Arab with amazing Hebrew, and he was the whole time.
I think that's why Bibi wants to close down kind of Hadisray. It was a weird. He's back now. He's on now.
Yeah.
Very odd. Yeah, and I was very surprised. He said, there's stuff we can't get away with because they won't let us. And he, from his end, because of the Guardian, he can't give a platform to right wingers, basically. Israeli right wingers. Very rare.
But is he representing the Guardian?
Well, again, it's with the Guardian.
Okay.
And I think with him, I'm not sure whether it's the Guardian says or just he would get killed,
Yeah.
giving a platform to.
But that's part of the problem, is that we're not listening to the other.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
I
why
love
do
that
we
book.
like it? Because they're like an echo for us. It's our echo chamber.
Mm-hmm. They confirm things for us. But yeah, I love it. Good. And Ilana, Diane?
Listen, I quoted her at the beginning about, which we can't really use so much anymore. We all quoted, you know, my heart doesn't have space at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, she is so brilliant,
She's incredible.
so eloquent.
Formidable as well. Johnny was like, I think she doesn't like me much. Because he
I have
said
to say, I'm
something
a
about
huge
Zionism.
fan.
Hmm?
I'm a huge, oh, by the way, I mean, I was on his father's show with Michael Marmer. One Purim, we did a Purim spiel. Michael Marmer was working for UJS, Danny Tao, and myself, the three of us. I was working at AJ6. We did a Purim spiel on his father's show.
Don't have to be Jewish.
You don't have to be Jewish.
Wow.
Yeah, that dates me a bit, but
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, I rarely listened to that until right towards its very end when I got to know Johnny, because I think it was a London thing. I don't know. In
maybe.
yeah.
So were you on Machon with him?
No, I didn't do Machon. He was a year below us, but no, we've been friends and we lived together in Oxford. We're like we're mates for a long time.
What an amazing group of people you are then. Accomplished.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was on Machon with Dan Patterson, whose line is it anyway? Which everybody says is basically how one in games.
Yeah, although I know the book he stole it from, so he nearly got sued, but they couldn't
Oh,
quite.
really?
Yeah. But yeah. No, Dan's I see him every now and then. Sort of, I think he's got a place in Tel Aviv.
Could do. I haven't seen him for a long time.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to tell them they have another 5 minutes.
Yep.
Voice, that would be fun.
Hmm?
You can broadcast a voice. That would be really fun. You have.
Wow. Oh. Right, she's gone back. Yeah, so I think I'm going to tell him. I maybe put into the chat or write down. Simply, we're not going to have time to process, but better that I wanted to leave you time to talk this time.
Can I put that in or not?
No, I'll tell him when they come back. But just, we won't have much time to share.
Great questions. They're very engaged, super engaged.
They're a good group. They're sort of committed and they're exploring.
Very much so.
My God, I would never have gone up to that woman.
But that's the thing, But I couldn't understand. Was she on the panel too? It wasn't quite clear.
No. I think someone was asking a question of the candidate and she asked another pretend question to negating her question, something like that.
I'm glad I'm not there. It's hard enough being here.
My God. I mean, I've heard about it. I read it and I always sort of think, oh, yeah, that's the right wing fear mongering stuff, but it's really happening.
This is Palo Alto. This is,
Yes.
Like Silicon Valley. This is
Ethnic studies. My God. It's terrifying. I got to the point like with the
But
fighting in
ethnic studies could be fine, where you learn about different ethnicities.
yeah.
I mean, we didn't in Barndine Grammar School for girls. There was no ethnic
We did
diversity.
we did religious studies, and that was basically,
Christianity.
yeah, it was basically if we can get Robbie to ask a question about Judaism, that will set the teacher off for another hour, and we can just do what we want. That was always that was my role.
Did your teacher know anything?
Pardon?
Did your
Oh yeah,
teacher
no,
know?
he was one of those earnest Council of Christians and Jews kind of
Ah,
guys. He was
okay.
very keen, and that was like, I'd get the pats on the back afterwards.
I was we used to sit in the room during assembly. There were only about 5, 6 Jewish girls in the school,
Right.
together with the late people. And then at the end, after the Lord's Prayer, we would march in. That's the Jew, that's the late one, and then come and sit down with our
Yes,
form.
just for announcements.
For now,
That's really funny. At our school, the same thing happened, but only eventually, for a good while, until I was like 15, I would be in there singing the hymns with everyone else, quite enjoying the singing.
I love the Christmas carols,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and the Lord's Prayer, knew it off by heart, and the whole thing. And it was suddenly, at 15, I suddenly went, hang on a minute. Onward, Christian soldiers, why am I singing that? And then it was like, okay.
Marching to war.
Yeah, marching as to war with the cross of Jesus. Going on before. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Funny old world. But I always thought there was something, I still think there was something healthier about that than growing up in Israel and being an oblivious majority.
Do you think your kids were an oblivious majority?
No, I made sure they weren't, but
Listen, they're oblivious majority to the Orthodox schools. I mean, the fact that the schools were not just Arabs. I mean, it's
even in this country itself. Jesus. What a fuck up.
okay. I'm going to tell them
Now.
close all rooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better that they come back like it's sentenced than no.
Oh, look, I was about to say there's a good sign. Hello, team.
These stories you give us are kind of impossible.
I don't know whether that's a compliment, or I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I want one with the right answer. Like
But look, it's a real thing. I don't know whether you've come across Douglas Murray.
oh, so funny. You know how things come in waves? Like I'd not heard of Douglas Murray, and in the last, I'm not joking, last 48 hours, you're the 4th person who has said, have you? Yeah. So
I think didn't Jung have something to say about that? About zeitgeist and something.
Very strange that that's happened literally 4 times in 48 hours.
Folks, so I want to say, remember last time I didn't give you enough time to talk because I wanted us time to process. So this time I'm doing the opposite way around. We won't have time to do any good processing, but at least you had a bit more time to talk. So real quick, maybe stick this in the chat. Let's play with the chat simply so that we can do things simultaneously. Did you hear an opinion that you wouldn't have thought of? And in general, how did it go? And I'll sort of read out just so that we can do things as it goes along. or anything that struck you as this went along, apart from Heidi saying that these stories are impossible. But then so's life, hey? It's just where it goes. Suck it up. Can't believe I said that. It's late. It's late. I haven't been sleeping much. Speak to us, Let. Well, we're...
So I'll jump in and say one of the things that we talked about was the public nature of this interaction and how that complicates the response.
I said I would.
Oh, I see. Eden, yeah, what? Were you... Are you not going to say anything? I got confused there. That's wild. Don't you want to know what Nancy and Eden are talking about? Come on, share something. What's going on? Anyway, Steve, our group was in agreement that we would not shake the person's hand, but wondered if we would have the presence of mind in the moment to think it through. Interesting, the three of us agreed for different reasons. And Sarah's group were 2 and 2. I'm thinking about whether or not my tendency to want to apologize and extend my handshake comes from being a young woman who is very online and inherently open to perception because of that. So hang on, I didn't get that. So the wanting to apologize means you would outstretch your hand, or you wouldn't? You would.
Yes, I definitely was like, I would extend my hand, but then also I was like, I would apologize. And we were talking about the public nature of things. And I'm like, well, I've been online for pretty much my entire life. And that kind of changes how I am perceived inherently.
I guess what's interesting there, though, I suppose, is that the perception when someone's seeing me shaking hands with the bad guy. So the bad guy will perceive me as a nice person, but the progressive friends will see me as a bad person.
And like considering what that perception would be, like, is this good right now? Is this okay? Is this going to be okay later? Maybe I should just apologize right now because it's good now, but it won't be later and it will be reposted and
Maybe we should just all go around with a big hat which says "I'm sorry" as we just go around. Or what's the Heidi? Sorry, go on.
I just have a question for the people who said they wouldn't shake his hand. Was there anyone who said they wouldn't shake his hand because they were concerned about how the people on the other side would see that?
Like
Or
in
was it-
private, would you have shaken his hand? Is that the question?
I guess that's the question because, I mean, again, you know, I felt like I would shake his hand because I just felt like it was the human thing to do. He's not doing anything offensive to me in that moment. But I'm just wondering if people who said they wouldn't shake his hand did it have to do with the people watching you?
Yes.
Some of it, yes. I mean, I think when you're a symbolic representative for an entire people, it can be challenging. And when and in this story, this person is speaking for hostages. And so if I were speaking for the hostages, I think what I said in my group is I feel like it's important to maintain some boundaries around our partners. And when we align ourselves with people that we otherwise disagree with, we find ourselves in complicated relationships. And like Kaylee was talking about the nature of the publicness of it. Like, I feel like that as a representative of the Jewish community, I'm very much filtered in my own life, like a lot. I don't always say what I feel because of like, I'm representing the JCC.
In private, would you shake his hand?
No. But
Okay,
I would,
that's
but
no
either
doubt
way,
discussion.
I would put my arm on his shoulder and say, I'd love to grab coffee with you sometime. I don't feel comfortable shaking your hand. People are, you know what I mean? Like, I would
Yeah,
want to
fair.
continue the conversation, but I wouldn't want to shut him down, but I also wouldn't want to make a gesture, a performative gesture of allyship.
Talking about shutting things down, I'm happy to stay around for another 5 minutes or so for us to keep talking. But I am aware that it is 15 after the hour. So you're welcome to leave, but I'd love to hear, Nancy, what you were about to say.
Well, I mean, with everything that you told us about stretch intentions, I mean, I would shake his hand and say, I appreciate your support for the hostages, especially since you said this person is trying to get as much attention as possible for this specific cause. And then I would say, I don't necessarily agree with you on everything, but I really appreciate this. And I feel like I could then explain myself later to other people because you said, go visit other people's opinions. Like, everyone's allowed to change their mind. And so if you're given the platform to explain yourself, now we're not always given the platform to explain ourselves. So it just depends on if everyone's on the same page or if they even care to hear the rest of what you have to say.
Absolutely. It's a good one. Davis?
I think I kind of argued for shaking the hand regardless of the perception because of just the undeniable truths that we are just all in this together and one people on one earth. And then I kind of agree with Nancy that like if you feel strongly about your principles and you feel like you have ground to stand on, then like your opinions and what you stand for will hold up. But the symbol of regardless of what side we're on, we are people and we are in this together and we need to figure things out. I think that's like a huge thing. So I would always shake the hand. I left 5% for like violence or a true Nazi with a swastika or something, but 95%, I think it's a huge symbol.
Thank you, Davis. Lara?
I'm thinking about a Trojan horse metaphor and how who this person is not named in the story. And we think that maybe we can divorce the name from the character and then think about it in this theoretical way. But there are definitely certain persona non grata out there who, because of my great disagreement with everything they stand for, it doesn't matter where they are, who they are. Like, I actually cannot imagine myself shaking their hand again in a public setting without the opportunity to really dialogue, because I think often it serves their purpose. They're not coming to me necessarily out of empathy for my situation. They're doing it for some other ulterior motive. They're hijacking this cause because somehow it helps whatever else they're doing. And yeah, I want to name that, like, there are certain criminals, like I said R. Kelly, for instance, like, who again hasn't come forward in any part of this conversation, but like
I haven't heard
I'm
him
not
saying much about
no,
Israel, but
no, hasn't brought it up to my knowledge, but like that's a person whose hand I'm not gonna shake, even if I appreciate the balm, the salve of some empathy after having a rough day of protesting and trying to bring awareness to my cause.
And I suppose the, God, we need support from wherever we can get it kind of desperation that people have also. But I hear that it's a big challenge. And in the booklet, which is coming out tomorrow, and as long as if you're signed up on our website, you'll get it just sent to you, but you can also download it for free. It'll be out there tomorrow. So then we also, there's a background to the story, and in the background we do specifically refer to Douglas Murray and his amazing advocacy for Israel and his significant problematicness on pretty much everything else in the progressive world, and etc. etc. So the character in the story sees Murray as a racist. Many others wouldn't, but he's certainly controversial and a challenging guy. Oh, cool. So I just got the email during this session. Folks, lovely seeing you again. See you again in 2 weeks' time, where we'll hope to bring everything together and solve the world.
Thank you, Robbie. Thanks to each and every one of you. I love listening to the comments. Wishing everybody Shana Tova, a better year ahead. It has to be better. And you're all making it better as well. So may we have good news in the year ahead.
Amen.
Be safe.
Bye.
May both be safe.
Safe.
Yeah. Shana Tova.
Thank you, everybody.